Let's also talk about the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction. Uh, Presented at the AMC-DRR, the national as well as international dimensions and all of society approach, the state government, central government departments, academia, civil service organizations and the private sector. The purpose of this particular conference, this is an Asian ministerial conference on disaster risk reduction which was held in New Delhi, and the purpose was to have the concrete ideas for implementing the Sendai framework, the sense of urgency and the priority of the issues to be taken up in this particular conference. The 10 points are as all development sectors must imbibe the principles of disaster risk reduction, invest in risk mapping. Risk coverage must include all starting from poor households to SMEs, women's leadership, leverage technology to enhance efficiency, develop a network of universities, utilize the opportunities, build on local capacity and initiative, make use of every opportunity to learn from disasters, and to bring about greater cohesion in international response to disasters. Now let's go first point by point. The first point deals with the all development sectors must imbibe the principles of disaster risk management. The four key sectors with the highest concentration of risk identify concrete measures for disaster risk reduction, mainstream DRR in flagship schemes of Government of India, establish a mechanism to ensure that standards of disaster resilience are periodically upgraded and disseminated. The point here is to see that the development sectors, be it roads and bridges or the airports or any other development in terms of health, everywhere we need to see that there is a minimum risk which is there or the least risk which is there. So we need to identify those sectors which have the highest risk, identify these particular risks, and the government has taken up those flagship programs and schemes wherein the disaster risk reduction has been reduced to a great extent. The next point is the risk coverage for all need to aim at all the people in all appropriate age groups, sex, communities, occupations, etc., assets and property, public and private, that includes houses, businesses, equipment, insurance. Currently, the finance resources for disaster risk management. So risk coverage must include all starting from poor household to the small and medium enterprises to multinational corporations to the nation states. Now these would mean that whenever there is a disaster, all these factories or the small and medium enterprises and the multinational corporations, they work in tandem and there is no loss or damage to their properties and there is a seamless work in each of these. So there is no disruption of the services which are being rendered by this particular industries. Similarly, it goes with the houses and equipments. There are equipments, there are airports, there are roads where the risk coverage must be done and see that the risk is the least minimum. So if the risk is covered for each one of them, then it will make sense that there is no disruption in the services by these particular products and the companies. The third point is recognizing the importance of women's role in every aspect of disaster management, preparatory response and recovery phases. Especially when the disaster strike, it is always the man force who come ahead in the front. However, we see here that the women is also a part of the disaster management recovery, including in the preparatory phase, response phase and recovery phase, so that there are a large number of women who are part of the whole process and thereby connecting to the local level, the local populace, and covering the and taking care of the large number of people and women, especially in the places where the disaster has struck. So greater involvement and leadership of women will ensure that women are taken care of, especially when women are in their pregnancy, and when the disaster strikes it becomes very difficult. So it is important that these pregnant women are taken care of and in the PHCs, and they are taken from the ground zero of the disaster where the disaster has struck to the place somewhere like PHCs or the bigger hospitals, and so that they are taken care of at that particular part. Especially there are women sarpanchas, there are matrons, there are doctors, and so on and so forth, and different kind of people involved in the disaster management. So here we see that the greater involvement and leadership of women is there in the disaster risk management. Let's go to the fourth point, that is invest in mapping disaster risk covering all hazards. Unless we map the disaster risk, it is very difficult to see that where the disaster is going to strike. And that's why, say for example, there are lower lying areas which needs to be taken up. We should have a common understanding of the nature and severity of disaster risk in different parts of the world. The fifth point is leverage technology to enhance the efficiency of disaster risk management efforts, which means the enhancement of the technology in different sectors. Say for example, here we have in India we have the IMD, India Meteorological Department, then the INCOIS is there, the other spacecrafts are there, and the ISRO is there, who helps in giving us the clear picture as to how the things are striking, how the disaster is striking. Especially say when it is a cyclone, the IMD comes out through its various bulletins and forecast bulletins, wherein we get the clear picture as to where the storm or where the cyclone is and how it is going to strike and what is the course of its cyclone. Similarly, INCOIS gives everything details about the tsunami as to how and when it is likely to occur and what are the steps to be taken further is being taken up by the national agencies, that is NDMA. At the state level it is the state disaster management authorities, and at the district level it is district management authorities, and likewise up to the village level. So unless the technology is enhanced to a greater extent, it is difficult in this particular time to gauge the disaster and its risk. Say for example, we have heard of the cyclone called Taukte in Gujarat, and earlier there were cyclones in Orissa, and of late there is a cyclone Biparjoy in Gujarat. So now with the kind of technology which is being used through the IMD and through the several bulletins which are being given by the IMD to the state level authorities, it becomes extremely important and easier for the operation and the preparedness measures to be taken by the state government and the district authorities, and this helps in a big manner to ensure that the life and the property of the people at large are not harmed, and there are all the preventive actions which are being taken up at the ground level. So mapping and exchanging expertise, technology and resources to maximize our collective impact, which is very important as far as the technology is concerned. And we must see that the new technology which comes up, whether it is a space technology or any other per se technology, can help us, including the artificial intelligence, usage of artificial intelligence in the IMD or maybe in the ISRO or any other organization of such a kind, which will definitely help to take care of the overall process of disaster management and disaster risk reduction. Let's go to the next point, which is developing a network of universities to work on the disaster issues. It is quite often seen that the academia, the government and the industries, there is seen a gap, and there is hardly any connect between what they are teaching and what is being operated at the national or the state level across the country. So it is important that when these kinds of disasters takes place, there has to be a network of universities like IIMs across the country, IITs, NITs, IISERs and AIMS, which has been formulated by National Institute of Disaster Management as a part of IUI and DRR, that is disaster risk reduction. Now, this is important. Why? Because unless there has been a study amongst the technical experts, the management experts as to how to deal with it, and the other universities, whatever, wherever they can, be a part of this particular part. Say, for example, NIO, we have a National Institute of Oceanography, which deals with the oceans. So there can be studies in the National Institute of Oceanography regarding the oceans and its development and the different currents which are taking place in the time of disasters. Similarly, the IMD comes out with the different weather reports and such kind of things. So especially when this kind of disaster strikes the country in different parts of the state in the country, then these kinds of universities, if there is a network, if there are studies, if there are relevant researches which are being taken up by the different universities in this particular kind of a disaster management sector, then probably it will help the country to contain these disasters, to reduce the loss of life and property, and thus help the nation to build a proper economy in the long run. So different universities could specialize in multidisciplinary research on disaster issues most relevant to them, which are, say for example, those states which are coastal states may definitely like to research on the cyclones and storms and other things. Those states wherein there have been earthquakes like Gujarat can also definitely may make a research on the disasters issues in terms of earthquake, cyclone, likewise. Similarly, the states like Kerala, the states like Karnataka, Orissa and Tamil Nadu, including the West Bengal and Andhra Pradesh, these particular kind of universities can again delve into the kind of research which are hitting them quite often through the cyclones and tsunamis. So likewise, the states can definitely get into this particular part. The northern states, especially the Himalayan and the northern belt of the country, the states, especially the J&K, Delhi, Punjab, UP, Bihar, these can definitely deal with the flow of rivers and the water disasters, especially during the rainy season, and of course the earthquake, which is again a very big part as far as the quite often taking part in the Himalayan region. So likewise, the network of universities should be there, and those research kind of things should be taking place, and they could come out with the right kind of papers, they could come out with the right kind of SOPs, and they can share with the academia and the government, and this will help in formulating a better policy as to how to deal with the disaster and how to deal with the disaster risk reduction. The next point is regarding making use of the social media and mobile technologies. It is quite often seen that people go into a panic mode when the disaster strikes. So if we have a better amount of the channel of communication, it will help the people to relieve of their pain and also the panic. See, the government and the nodal agencies can open their own Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts. A dedicated personnel expert in information technology can be hired to manage those accounts. Then the multi-way communication. Victims and their relatives, responders, government personnel, relief officers, and many more can be approached at the same time. And in case of forecasting and early warning, it delivers very quick services to the end users. So we are of course well aware with the IMD and its forecast in terms of cyclone and the inquires in terms of the tsunamis and others. So likewise, the timely delivery of this kind of services will help in a greater manner to the nation and the state to have a preventive kind of measures which can be taken up to deal with the disasters. Let's go to the next point. The 8th point deals with investing in the local capacity not only for response but also for the disaster risk reduction. We need to expand the scope of community-based efforts and support communities to identify local risk reduction measures and implement them. Now this is very rightly said, because though the nation is working at the national level in terms of the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, plus the NDRF, National Disaster Response Force. However, the resources of the government are per se are comparatively much less, and that is why when the disaster strike at a particular point in the state or a district level or the village level, it becomes very important that the local communities rise up to face this particular kind of disaster. And that is why the scope of community must be based on the support of the communities, who should be able to identify the local risk reduction measures, like how to go about when the things are taking place in a certain village. Say for example, under the national NCRMP, there has been a program wherein the shelters have been built for in the large number across the coastal belts of the India, and under that there are a lot of shelter homes which have been built. Now these shelter homes are very important, and when the village sarpanch or the local mamlatdar and the other officers who are relevant with this particular kind of taking up the shelter homes, they can always move the local villagers, including the women folk, the man folk, the children, the old age people, and the rest of the village to a safer place. Because if they are low-lying areas, it becomes very important that they are not stricken by the disaster. And that is why this particular shelter homes have been made, to see that their capacity has been rising. Now in this kind of a thing where the community is there in a village, they have to be strengthened to see that they take care of the management of the local people, and along with the administration and hand in hand with the local administration at the village level, to see that the right amount of facilities are extended to those people who are struck by the disasters for whatever number of amount of days till the disaster strikes, and then they are put back to their own villages and their own homes till the disaster is over. So the local communities are very helpful. In terms of cities, there are local communities, and similarly there are other agencies which are NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and other particular community-based organizations. They have all to be roped in to this particular part to deal with the disaster management, and this will certainly help the government and all the people of the city and the village, and the disaster can be dealt in a very nice manner and without any loss of life and property of that particular area. The next point is systematize the post-disaster recovery based on lessons learned from the past disasters. Now this is very important, as to once the disaster strikes, the whole state or the local administration is into dealing with the disaster management and dealing with the disaster risk reduction activities and those kind of things. But after the disaster is struck, and thereafter what is the remains, say for example if there is something which has happened across, so in past what kind of steps were taken, what other measures were taken to mitigate this particular disasters, those all have to be studied properly and have to be updated, so that whenever the next disaster strikes, at least the local level administration is well aware as to what steps they should be taken, so that there is minimum or the least loss of life and property, and the disruption to the overall process is again taken back, and the normal course of social life and environment is normalized at the earliest possible. The last point about the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda is about bringing about greater cohesion in international response to disasters. This is a greater cohesion in terms of Sendai framework and other frameworks which we have dealt earlier, in terms of SDGs, in terms of Millennium Development Goals, in terms of climate change, and likewise. So there has to be a greater cohesion in the international response to any disasters. Say for example, we had a Turkey earthquake very recently, and there we saw that large number of different countries went to help the people for the relief and rescue operations in Turkey. So it is very important that there is an international cooperation in these kinds of disasters, irrespective of the caste, creed, community and the country, and people should rush in to help the people who are in distress at that particular point of time. So there is a collective strength which could be enhanced if we work under a common umbrella.